Prachanda Muzaffar has been, previously he was the president of Aliran in Malaysia, but currently he is the president of the International Movement for a Just World, or JUST, very prominent intellectual in our country, and he has given his talks at many seminars domestically and internationally, and also a recipient of many international awards related to his scholarship and social activism. And with this, I give the floor to you, Prashanda.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. I'd like to begin by thanking Dr. Farouk, IRF, and other organizations involved in this webinar. It is always a pleasure and also an occasion which gives rise to pain to talk about Palestine, because it is a tragedy, a massive colossal tragedy, which affects all of us who are concerned about justice. It's not for nothing that Nelson Mandela described the Palestinian issue as the greatest moral issue of our time, some years before he passed away. I don't want to repeat what others have talked about. They've all contributed substantially to this discussion. What I'll do is perhaps look at a couple of other dimensions which should be highlighted. I'm therefore very grateful for the contributions that the others have made, because it makes one's task a lot easier, especially for Peter Selzak's historical narration and the way you linked it with present developments, that I think has been very useful as a sort of backdrop to what we're going to do. In my presentation, I'm going to make 3 points. The first, related to what my colleagues, I'm going to be explicit about is that the two-state solution was never a solution right from the beginning, because Israel was not interested in Palestinians. Even when Israel and the Zionist movement supported the idea of partition in 1937, this was in response to the Peel Commission report, said yes, we could partition, but they were not sincere about this. 47, 48, what gave birth to the State of Israel? Well, there was an idea of partition. A bigger portion of the land would go to a smaller percentage of the population. This was under the auspices of the United Nations, which at that time was dominated by Western countries. And the other portion would go to Palestine. But Israel gave the impression that it accepted this. In reality, of course, look at some of the writings of Ben-Gurion and others, they were not happy with this. They did not want partition. All along, they'd wanted Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, single entity, total control, nation which, as far as they're concerned, had been promised to them by God. And as Peter pointed out very correctly, if you look at the Zionist movement in particular, in the latter part of the 19th century, most of them did not believe in God, but they believed that God made this promise to Israel. In any case, they were not serious about a state for Palestine, whatever their rhetoric at a certain point in the past. After the 1967 war, both the elites and public opinion as a whole became totally committed to the idea of an undivided Israel. Israel, where it should be the home of only the Israeli people, the Jews, and the Palestinians had no role at all. Because 67 was a major psychological boost for the Zionist movement and for the state of Israel. 67, 68. And after that, the commitment was total. This idea of single state or Israel, no Palestine, whatever the pretense. Now, friends, that's the background. And this is the first point I want to make. And very quickly, I want to relate that to what we have been discussing, all the panelists, in different ways. If the two-state solution is a non-starter, it's never meant to be taken seriously, what is left? What can the Palestinians hope for? What can those who are fighting for justice all over the world, who are committed to this cause, what can we hope for? Is it either a two-state solution or no state? Or can we talk about a single constitutional democratic state for everyone, meaning by which Arabs and Jews, or Christians, Muslims, and of course the Jews as a religious community, all of them sharing a single state, whatever its name may be, a single constitutional democratic state. Is that the solution? This is the position that I'd taken right from the very beginning when I became concerned about this huge challenge facing that in the ultimate analysis, this is the solution. It has to be a single state, decentralized, perhaps, sort of maybe confederation in terms of its structure, where the different communities would have their rights, and that's very important. And these rights would have ironclad guarantees so that no one feels overwhelmed, no one feels that they would be marginalized. It should not be dominated by any particular community, whatever the demographics. I think this is quite important. In the context of West Asia, you have the example of Lebanon, which has been an unhappy episode. Lebanon, it has never really worked. This idea of sharing power among the different communities that was linked to the French colonial power. And if you look at other experiments in different parts of the world, we don't have too many examples of communities sharing power, whatever, confederation, federation. They've always been problems. So we can expect this idea of a single democratic state also to face huge problems, especially after all that one has gone through. Years of bloodshed, turmoil, of chaos. It's going to be very difficult, very, very difficult. But having said that, let me also try to underscore what I think are some glimmers of hope. Some glimmers of hope. Why this may be worth struggling for a single democratic. There are a few reasons. All along, there have been individuals from the Muslim community, Jews, Christians, who have been supportive of this idea, who have been advocates. Edward Said is someone who supported this idea, of course, Ilan Pape, and there have been others, I suppose, supported this idea, right? But it's always been small numbers of people. But that could change. The first reason I want to suggest is this. When people realize that there is no two-state solution, that it is a dead end, a cul-de-sac, two-state solution, and they're convinced that this game cannot go on. It has been a game. It has been a fantastic game, this idea of two-state solution, negotiations for peace and all the rest of it. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to be a reality. Then I think the commitment to the idea of a single state will grow, because that is the alternative. So I see that as something which has some possibility of growing as an idea, because of the situation that the two-state solution is in now. And today it has become explicit, especially after the deal of the century, the annexation of certain choice areas, settlements, West Bank settlements, and after Jerusalem and the United States of America, all these things that have happened, people have become convinced, quite a lot of people, including the democratic movement that has been set up, small as it is, trying to establish a single democratic state. So I think it's beginning to gather some momentum for what it's worth, because of the situation that presents itself. I would like to argue that the fact that there are Palestinians who are resisting, and they are the most remarkable people when it comes to resistance. Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Some Jews who support this cause, their resistance has been tremendous. So that itself is hope. They've not given up. Yasser Arafat was once asked towards the end of his life what he thought was the greatest achievement of the Palestinians. This was in a BBC interview. And he said, I think the greatest achievement is that we are not the Red Indians of the 20th century. We have not been wiped out. We resist, we continue to resist. So Palestinian resistance is going to be there forever. No one would be able to eliminate, to wipe out Palestinian resistance. That, I think, is yet another. Find that there is people, their resistance, and that counts a great deal. Activities that continue to happen. And then, of course, because of circumstances, there's a certain impetus, meaning by which the futility of the two-state solution, there's a certain impetus for a single democratic state. And I think BDS has contributed. There's no doubt about it. Though the BDS doesn't talk about a single nation state and all the rest of it, nonetheless, as a resistance movement, as a movement which articulates an alternative, BDS has been great help to this. It focuses upon something that is being done and something which gives hope to a lot of people. So the growth of the BDS movement and its growth, especially in parts of Europe and even in the United States of America, you find that university campuses, remember that walkout at Harvard University, what had happened at Berkeley and so on, these may appear small events, but in the larger scheme of things, these small events count greatly. Who would have thought that the Israeli ambassador to the United States of America would be treated in that manner at Harvard, which has been one of the pillars of the Zionist movement at the intellectual level. And it's one of the universities where, at the level of university elites, it's given a great deal of support to Zionism and to Israel. But this had happened, that people are standing now. So this, I think, is something that gives some hope that BDS movement is a focus, various things happening in different parts of the world, including in the West, and the United States included, at the level of people. We're not talking of governments and the elites. It provides some hope. Change is possible. I would like to argue, friends, that apart from what has been mentioned, there is yet another factor that we must take into account. And what is that? The struggle of the Palestinians and all those who are committed to this movement, non-Palestinians, will depend to some extent upon the international, the global situation, that particular landscape. One of the factors that has helped Israel, without any doubt at all, is the support it receives from the United States and from Europe. Europe, psychological, but also physical and material. But the United States of America has been a tremendous source of support for Israel, apart from finance, arms, everything. The United States has been a major supporter of Israel. But the United States is declining. Its decline is inevitable. I mean, those who argue, no, it's not true, the US is still powerful. Yes, it is powerful, but it is certainly, and that decline is irreversible. There's no force on earth that can stop the United States decline as a major power. Well, simply because all powers in history have declined after a period of time. And if you look at the United States of America, the signs are all there. If you look at the economy, if you look at its dysfunctional political system, if you look at culturally what is happening, its challenges, if you look at technology, where it has been very, very strong, science, technology, you find others are major competitors today in terms of scientific papers that are produced, in terms of technological inventions. It has changed. You just look at Huawei and you look at the other innovations that are taking place. Things are changing. The United States is no longer the top dog. And it is going to become much more rapid, its decline, after the coronavirus crisis. Because if the crisis has highlighted anything at all, it is the utter dysfunctional nature of the American state. More than 92,000 who have died, which is such a tragedy, in the richest country in the world, according to conventional criteria. Look at the number of infections. Look at the total mess, the inability to come to grips with the issues emanating from that crisis, including unemployment, millions and millions who are without jobs, long soup kitchens, and so on. The decline of the United States of America, to return to our central point, means that Israel will be without its major protective banner. That's going to affect the position of Israel in the near future, believe me, because the United States will not be able to support Israel and the way it has dominated the area, or for that matter, Saudi Arabia, which is yet another country that works with Israel and with the United States of America. I think all these nations that are very close to the United States of America, some of them proxies, others stooges, they will not be able to perpetuate their power. Israel will be a major change that is inevitable, that's going to happen at the global level. Can Israel turn to Russia? Can Saudi Arabia turn to Russia? There are, of course, things like this that are happening. If you look at certain aspects of international politics. But I do not think Russia would be able to protect Israel the way the United States was able to. Even though Russia is close to Israel, it is close to Israel. It will not be Israel. Because Russia has got other stakes. Those stakes are important. Bases, in terms of military relationships. China, will China be able to protect Israel? China is very interested in Israeli technology. It's true. It will not be able to provide that. And again, China too has got other interests in the region. Apart from oil, apart from its strategic relationships with various countries. Don't forget, China's only strategic foothold in the world is in Djibouti, which is in that region, the region of West Asia. In other words, Israel won't be able to depend on anyone else. The way it had this incestuous, very intimate relationship with the United States. It was the tail that wagged the dog. It won't happen. So that, I think, will change the situation in West Asia. Others will assert themselves. The arithmetic will change. Political dynamics will change. And we will see certain trends becoming more and more visible, becoming more and more pronounced as we go. And that brings me to the last point I want to make. I really believe, friends, that the international community, meaning by which people, I'm not talking of governments, ordinary people have to do something. And I think we have to commit ourselves totally to the idea of a single democratic constitution. For each of the communities, this is not going to be easy. And there are Muslims all over the world, and there are Christians all over the world. Of course, the Jewish population is smaller, but if you look at these two communities, there are some adjustments they have to make to support this idea of a single state, constitutional, democratic state. For those Muslims who believe that the future of Israel is an Islamic state, meaning by which it's a state that proclaims Islam, waves the Islamic banner, I honestly, sincerely believe that one must stop. Because Palestine is multi-religious, and the sort of Islamic state that one has in mind, it's not going to work in the context of Palestine. It has not worked in many other parts of the Muslim world. This is the truth. This idea of an Islamic state that is driven by a certain interpretation of law, a certain interpretation of Islamic edicts, and so on. I think one has to be realistic. So one has to commit oneself to a constitutional democratic state. I know that the word secular has a certain sort of revulsion among some people. We don't have to use that word, but that is not important. Democratic, constitutional, laws made by human beings, framed by the interests of people. This is what one means. This is the sort of state one has to do. And I think a lot of the Muslims who support the Palestinian cause in different parts of the world, they have to start thinking along those lines. Constitutional democracies. For the interests of the Palestinians themselves. And for Christians, the Christian population is declining, dwindling in Palestine, which I think is sad. I think it is a tragedy in a sense because, this is the birthplace of Christianity. It's a pity that over the last few decades, the population has declined. But it's becoming increasingly evident that if Christianity is going to perpetuate its foothold in that region, it has to be within the framework of such a state. It cannot be in an Islamic state, and it cannot be in a sort of a state where there is continuous conflict. Christianity was a victim for a long while of that conflict, which is why the population started dwindling. If you look at the writings of leaders of the Kairos movement in Palestine, the Christian movement, they have been victims. So I think a sort of state that guarantees everyone's rights and recognizes the role of Christianity, that provides some hope. So Muslims, Christians will have to adjust. Their adjustment won't be the most important change that has to take place. I think the change has to come from within Palestine itself. Both Muslims, Christians, and Jews will have to work towards this. For Jews, at the moment, I know it's going to be very difficult because this whole idea of a Jewish state is so strong. It's become stronger over the years compared to the time of Ben Gurion in 1948 and so on. We know that. But if one had a long-term view, is this viable? A Jewish state which is in an antagonistic relationship with everyone else, which doesn't recognize the basic rights of the Palestinian people, which treats them like fourth, fifth, sixth class citizens, which every now and then oppresses them and suppresses them. Is that viable? A state which is like a garrison, that sort of mentality, is that viable? This is why thinking Jews have always raised this question. Is this the future? Where you are, as if you are in a sort of situation where you have to be full alert against your neighbors, those people who should be your friends. This is the reason why I think one of the most compelling arguments for a single democratic state is this, that it is going to allow the Jews to play a role. Jewish character linked to its history should be preserved. This is a legitimate aspect of Palestinian history. If you look at the history of Jerusalem, for instance, Jews, Muslims, Christians have all played a role in shaping that history. One can recognize that, work towards that, and realize that the only way to work towards that is through this single democratic state. Not a Jewish state, not an Islamic state. And if I may add, even this idea of an Arab state as such, I'm uneasy about it. I'm uneasy about the idea of an Arab state which sometimes marginalizes the Kurds. This is the problem. If you sort of try to project a state linked to a particular ethnicity, as if that is the defining attribute of that state, you have to think of an identity that is all-encompassing, an identity that is inclusive in the real sense. And that, to my mind, would be the greatest contribution of a single democratic constitutional state in Palestine that everyone can identify. What is that greatest contribution? It would be a state of the future. It would be a state which reflects current trends and what the world of tomorrow will be, where we recognize finally that the real identity that counts for us as human beings is our human identity that transcends our particularistic identity, our individual ethnic and religious identity. It goes beyond all these identities. That is the identity that counts. And let the Palestinian, or whatever name you want to give, state of the future be the herald of that notion of human civilization.